Hi, I'm Davy. I'm awesome. Welcome to Davy's Awesome Movies, where I review the styles of movies that I love, the alternative, B-rated, cult-style flicks. And this week, we're in October. I love doing Universal Monsters. This one technically is not a Universal Monster. Actually, not technically. It's not a Universal Monster. It's Paramount, later MGM. The last incarnation of it was Universal. But I'm adding this into the Universal Monsters just because a lot of people tend to confuse this with a Universal Monster. So it kind of just fits in. So let's get into it. This one came out in 1931 and was directed and produced by Ruben Mamoulian and written by Samuel Hoffenstein and Percy Heath and based on the novel by Robert Louis Stevenson. And this one is made and distributed by Paramount Pictures. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The movie opens with first-person viewing of our lead, Dr. Henry Jekyll, played by Frederick March.
How do you do, Dr. Jekyll?
How do you do?
In this, they do pronounce his name Jekyll, and this is the only Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde movie that pronounces his name Jekyll, and technically that is the correct pronunciation of the name. I just prefer Jekyll. Not only is it the way everybody else says it, but it's got a better ring to it. It finally drops the first-person aspect when Dr. Jekyll is having a lecture for his fellow scientists about what he is working on.
The soul of man.
Basically, he believes that people have good sides and bad sides, and that if they could find a way to isolate the good and the bad and separate them, then the good in them would soar and do great things, whereas the evil,
once liberated, would fulfill itself and trouble us no more.
oh yeah, unless the way the evil fulfills itself is by troubling you.
Duh!
And it turns out he's not just a scientist, he's also a medical doctor and surgeon. Which means that whereas this guy turns out to be a very good man, he's a scientist, he's a doctor, surgeon, he's got a huge God complex. To illustrate what a good man he actually is, though, he has a Dr. Landon, a colleague and friend of his, go to a party being held by his fiance's parents to inform them he's going to be late. He has to perform a free surgery on this lady.
Jekyll gives entirely too much time to his charity patients.
No, I love him for that.
I mean, there's worse qualities than a son-in-law. When he finally arrives at the party, he goes and finds his fiancée, Muriel.
Chide me, mock me, hate me, but don't send me away.
I'd go with mock. Ooh, look at me. I'm in a movie where people pronounce my name Jekyll.
Bitch!
After they talk and kiss, which back then was like, woohoo, he goes to find Muriel's father.
She would make Muriel and me very happy if you'd set an earlier date for our wedding.
The date her father has set is 8 months away, and that's too far for him. He's horny. But her father says he won't. He's not moving it up at all. 8 months is not a long time, especially considering he had to be engaged to his wife for 5 years. Okay, that one I wouldn't do.
Well, please don't make me wait that long for Muriel.
Well, I would just give you this advice. If you don't want to wait 5 years, then shut up. Later, Dr. Onion is just telling him, like, be patient, dude. I know you're feeling this way now, but once you get married, it'll sober you up.
I'm not marrying to be sober. I'm marrying to be drunk.
Beers!
He means drunk on love, you idiot. Then again, this is, the film bestie we're talking about. He won't go to a wedding that doesn't have an open bar. But as they're walking, Dr. Jekyll and Lanyon see a prostitute who's being assaulted. So even though she's a prostitute, she's still a woman. He's a good man. He intervenes. And he takes her upstairs to her little studio apartment. Oh, I'm sorry. This is in London. Her studio flat. Or whatever they call studios. I just know they call apartments flats. What if it's not flat? What if I have a bumpy apartment? The prostitute is Ivy Peterson. And because this was during the pre-code that movies used to have to do from like 1934 to sometime in the 1960s, they had her as a prostitute. They had some sexual stuff in here. 10 years later, when MGM bought the rights to this, they changed her from being a prostitute to a barmaid so as not to upset the code. These people back then probably would have had heart attacks with this content we put into romantic comedies, let alone horror movies nowadays. When they get up to her room, she is complaining about pain in her leg and her ribs, and He looks her over real quick and, well, he determines.
You're not seriously hurt. Bit of a rest to do you no harm, though.
Because she just needs some rest, he turns aside so she can get undressed and get into bed. Which, again, pre-code. But after she's in bed and ready to rest, she tries to pay him. I guess this would be considered barter system, I don't know. But Lanyon had walked in, so not gonna happen. So, he and Lanyon leave. Yeah, it's thanks to these kinds of things, this racy dialogue and stuff, that drove censors crazy, which is why in 1934 they came up with the Motion Picture Production Code. Thanks. And once that code came out, this movie had to cut 8 minutes to be allowed to be seen in theaters, because this is also, again, back when there weren't TVs in everybody's home. The only way you could see a movie is if it was playing at the movie theater. As they're leaving, Dr. Lanyon is shaming Dr. Jekyll for having kissed her. Dr. Jekyll just brushes it off like, look, it was an impulse. I couldn't help it. Starts saying things like, a person who is starving cannot stop thinking about food. A person who is dying of thirst will be craving water. Basically, in the words of Tommy Kelly, if he doesn't get laid, he's gonna die.
We don't care if you get it.
But he says he is working on these impulses.
Oh, you're mad.
Mad, eh, Lanyon? We'll see.
Oh yes, we'll see. Now we see Dr. Jekyll in his lab finishing what he believes is a potion that will alienate the good and the bad in the people and separate them. He takes a drink of this potion and immediately starts changing. And it changes into Mr. Hyde. When the transformation is complete and he is fully now Mr. Hyde, he looks, in my opinion, like a member of the Monkees. But apparently they wanted to make him look like Neanderthal Man.
If you could see me now, what would you think?
I'd think you need a dentist. Then again, this is set in London, so nobody around you will probably notice. His servant, Mr. Poole, hears something, knocks on the door, telling Dr. Jekyll he not only heard something, but someone.
Well, there was someone here, a friend of mine. His name is, Hyde.
That's how he got the name Mr. Hyde. Later, we find out that Muriel's father is taking her on a trip with him, and this is angering Dr. Jekyll. They're going to be gone for months. Dr. Jekyll's servant Poole suggests to Dr. Jekyll, why don't you just go out, enjoy yourself, get your mind off it, enjoy the London nightlife.
Gentlemen like me have to be very careful of what they do and say.
Okay, well, you got Poole there. The two of you, play go fish. So now Jekyll decides to whip up a batch of his potion. That's the face I make if I taste Nutella. So now as Mr. Hyde, he's not a gentleman, he doesn't have to be careful, and he decides to go to a music hall in hopes of finding Ivy. And fortune smiles, he finds her.
Tell that wench in black to come over and have a bottle of wine with me.
Even in 1931, it was not a good thing to call a woman a wench. When she comes over, she's, well, let's just say she's not impressed with Mr. Hyde. But he does convince her to sit down. At some point, her earlier potential customer comes over, angry that somebody has poached his lady.
I'll knock your blooming head out of here,
And at this point, he decides to go find another girl. She tries to leave, but he won't let her.
I love you. I love you. You understand?
Well, in that case, you should run. We fast forward, and Hyde has basically set Ivy up in a nicer place, bigger, more spacious, couple rooms. But she's not happy. He keeps her there like a mistress, has a lot of rules, is very demanding, and is extremely abusive. So much so that people around the flats hear her, and particularly her landlady, does not like Mr. Hyde.
And my advice, dearie,
You'd shut up just like you're doing now. Of course, Hyde tells the landlady to beat it. Then notices in the paper there's an announcement that Muriel and her father are returning, which goes to show that, man, they really did print everything in the papers back then. He tells Ivy he's going to be gone for a couple of days, which of course she's happy about, but warns her she has no idea when he's going to return. And when he does return, she better not do anything out of place.
I'll show you what horror means.
I made the same threat to my brother. He didn't believe me. I told him I'd show him true horror, and still he taunted me. I warned him again and again the horrors I would inflict on him, and he taunted and he taunted and he taunted. And then I showed him this! Before he goes, he makes her sing. She didn't want to sing. The next day, Henry Jekyll is himself again. He has his servant Poole deliver something to Ivy, because he's feeling guilty.
50 pounds.
She does not know him. Like, she doesn't think she knows him at all. She didn't get his name the first time they met. So she's conflicted. This stranger just gave her 50 pounds, which is a lot of money. Now, Jekyll goes to meet with his fiancée, Muriel.
I've played with dangerous knowledge.
Oh, you watched Dr. Pimple Popper too, huh? Yeah. Still have nightmares. Muriel's father comes in and they talk to him again about pushing up the marriage, and he finally agrees. He'll let them get married in 1 month.
Oh, thank you, sir. By Jove, you've made me happy, sir.
Jolly good, sir. Especially if you're still paying for it. When Jekyll gets home, he is overjoyed. He can't contain himself in front of his servant Poole, until Poole tells him that Ivy is there waiting for him.
What does she want?
That changed his mood pretty quick. So, of course, he allows Ivy in.
Why, it's you, sir.
She's shocked. She doesn't charge that much. Actually, she came to inform him that she can't accept his money, and he wants to know why.
Yes, why? Yes, why? Pretty, ain't it?
See, this is a lost art of movie making. We don't see her bruises, her scars, or anything that's going on. They just say something about it and acknowledge that the audience might be smart enough to understand it. Nowadays, they have to show us every tiny little grotesque thing. Sorry, but that's one thing I love about older movies. They didn't feel the need to spoon-feed everything to us. You got it or you didn't.
I need help, I do.
I'll say. You're English. You should have better grammar than that. She tells him about Hyde.
If he knows that I've been here today, I don't know what he'll do.
I guess we'll find out, won't we?
You'll not see Hyde again.
Really? But there's still 30 minutes of movie. She leaves with the promise that Hyde will never show his face again. Problem is, Dr. Jekyll did not know that because of all the previous times he'd taken the potion, Hyde doesn't need the potion to come out anymore. Hyde can come out at will. And to make matters worse, as Hyde is running off to go find Ivy, Jekyll was supposed to be at his engagement party. But like I said, Hyde has other plans.
Why, you lying wench!
She says it can't be true. Dr. Jekyll was the only one she told anything to, and there's no way he would have ever told anybody, especially Hyde.
I am Jekyll.
Uh-oh. She tries to run off, but it's no use.
There, my dove.
And he strangles her to death. I will say that's one thing I didn't like about a lot of these movies. It's always strangulation. You know, there are other ways to kill people. Back at the party...
No, Father, something terrible must have happened.
I mean, she's not wrong. Hyde now is trying to get away because everybody in the apartment heard him killing Ivy. So as Jekyll, he sends word to Dr. Lanyon to go to his lab, because Hyde can't get in there, and get the box that contains the stuff for his potion, and give it to a man named Hyde. Only thing is when Lanyon meets Hyde, he wants answers.
I warn you not to meddle. You'll take me to Dr. Jekyll, or you'll not leave this room.
He didn't want to do this, but he has no choice. In front of Lanyon, he has to make a potion and take it so he can turn back into Henry Jekyll. Which means now you've got a very awkward conversation with Lanyon at the grotesque things you went through just to get a little nookie. I'm pretty sure that potion has Nutella in it. After he changes back into Jekyll, he talks to Dr. Lanyon about everything he's been through and how guilty he feels about the stuff that he can't stop himself doing as Hyde. Promises that he will never take the potion again, but Lanyon points out Hyde can come out without you taking that potion. He just promises he's going to fight him off. He knows he can. But he also agrees that he needs to go break it off with Muriel because it's too dangerous. So he goes to Muriel's to break it off with her. Of course, at this point, the father is not going to let them marry at all. But she doesn't care. She'll marry without her father's permission. She wants answers.
I'm one of the living dead!
You're a vampire? No, you're not. Because even as a vampire, you'd have better teeth. He leaves, she cries. And as he's leaving, guess who decides to come back? Hyde has no interest in setting her free. He wants to go say hello.
I don't...
Rude! Of course, because of her screams, her father comes in. And to think, if he would have just let them marry sooner, that horny little do-gooder would have never created an alter ego. But not only did her father and a few servants hear, but people around started hearing this, and they started screaming for the police. So now he's running from men and police. They lose him around the time he gets back to his lab.
I know whose cane this is. I can take you to the man.
Lanyon takes them to the lab. But when they get there...
He's gone out there, through the back door.
But Lanyon is right behind them.
There he is. There's your man.
This causes him to change back to Hyde. And as Hyde, he fights.
Hey, boy, drop that knife!
So that's that. He dies, and his body turns back into Dr. Jekyll. And we learn a very, very important moral in this story. And that is, evil people have disgusting teeth. So there you have it. That's a 1931 classic, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This was the first non-silent film. There was a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde that was very successful before it, but it was a silent film starring John Barrymore, grandfather of Drew Barrymore. In fact, John Barrymore, the one who was in the 1920 version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the silent film, was offered to reprise his role in this remake, but he turned it down. And they got Frederick Marsh. 10 years later, in 1941, they would also remake this. MGM bought the rights to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and cast Spencer Tracy in it. But here's the thing. The critics loved this one. It got high praise in its day. 10 years later, that one, not so much. They felt that Spencer Tracy's portrayal of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was not as good as Frederick Marsh at all. But in efforts to keep comparisons away, because MGM had bought the rights to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, they did not allow this one to be shown in theaters at all for many years. Basically, they got to a point where there are people from that era who think that the 1941 was the first non-silent film. And I will say, as somebody who's seen both, this one is way better. In fact, even today, it gets high praise. I did talk about this was before the motion picture production code. It did get released a little bit after that came out, and I mentioned how they had to cut 8 minutes of content out so it could be shown in theaters. But you don't have to worry, because once that whole thing was done and they started putting things out on VHS, it was restored. So pretty much any version you're going to find nowadays, whether it's streaming, DVD, or an old VHS copy, it's going to be with the original content. Which just makes me laugh at how bad censorship used to be. Like, there was no nudity in this. There was just sexually suggestive content. Because back then, you could not suggest people had sex. You don't believe me? An episode of I Love Lucy was almost not aired because they said the word pregnant. But like I said, this movie was a big success. Off of a $535,000 budget, which was a big budget back then, it did $1.25 million in the box office, which again, huge hit. As huge a hit as it was, though, it didn't save Paramount Pictures from going bankrupt 2 years later. Later, they did come back, and obviously they've been making movies ever since. But that's probably why it was so easy to buy the rights to this. At this point, the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing, the characters themselves are public domain. Pretty much anybody can use it now. The last time they tried to bring back anything with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was the character Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, played by Russell Crowe in the Mummy movie, the one with Tom Cruise. Which is one reason I decided to go ahead and include this in my Universal Monster reviews, because, again, one, I get that a lot. When I talk to the few people I know who are very into Universal Monsters like me, I've had many people bring up Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, so much so that as a kid, for a long time, I thought it was a Universal Monster. I found out later it wasn't. It wasn't even through Universal. But especially now, a lot of people think that because when Universal was going to create a dark universe with all their old monsters, they had Tom Cruise as the Mummy, they had Johnny Depp as the Invisible Man, they had Russell Crowe as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He was going to be included in the whole Dark Universe thing with Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein, and I don't know who else they were going to bring into that because it never came to fruition because, well, that Mummy movie sucked. But ultimately, I feel like that's a good idea. If they ever do try to take another run at Universal Monsters, updated, bringing it back, whether they do a cinematic universe or just standalone films, definitely think they should include this one. Even in its day, I'm pretty sure Universal was kicking themselves for not making it first, considering that this was the first ever horror movie to receive an Oscar. So on that note, I know it's not technically a Universal Monster movie, but if you are a fan of Universal Monster movies like I am, then I think you should find and watch Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's close enough to Universal Monsters, and it's actually a really good film. So there you have it. That's my movie review this week. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure to hit like, hit subscribe, hit the little bell so you get notifications when I post new videos, and leave a comment that I can respond to in my next comment corner. Tell me what you thought of the 1931 version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Tell me if it angers you that I included it as the Universal Monsters, or if you already thought it was one. Love you guys.